Let's Renew. It's a series of conversations with leaders from across the hospitality sector, focused on supporting and reinvigorating hospitality post-pandemic, with emphasis on creating opportunities and jobs for young people. Alex Gunter, Renew's youth leader, and myself, Stephen Talon, a spokesperson for the Renew Party, are delighted to welcome today's guest, Steve Lowy, director and co-founder, UMI Digital, or UMI Digital, providing marketing services and technology to hotels and travel services. Steve is chairman of the Hotel and Marketing Services Association in the UK, British Educational Travel Association, and CEO of an accommodation and education business operating hundreds of apartments in central London. Welcome, Steve, and please forgive me if I've left out anything you would like to add.
Thank you, Steve, so much for coming to join us today. I'd like to also extend a welcome to an intern who's going to be joining us for this podcast. His name's Donovan. And please say hello to the audience, Donovan.
Hi there, everyone. It's great to be at the podcast. Thank you for your invitation.
So Donovan is one of the many young people who is looking for work in such a challenging time, and often found the hospitality is quite a daunting industry to get into. But of course, this is such a difficult period that we face ourselves with these days. How has your company dealt with this, Stephen? Have you been massively affected? How are you having to adapt?
I run two companies. One is an educational business, which is both in-person education and accommodation, mainly aimed at the American market, and also a digital business, Digital, which I set up over 10 years ago, and provides marketing and technology services to the hospitality and tourism space. I think it's been a challenge for both businesses. UMI Digital was set up out of a coffee shop. So in terms of remote working and flexible working and all of that technology, that was there, that was ready for us to go. Obviously, our end customer, being hospitality and tourism businesses, arguably the worst hit industry out of any industry from this whole COVID crisis. So it's been a challenge, but a lot of businesses have chosen to innovate, whether it's food box deliveries or virtual tours, or even, we have clients around the world where some places have not necessarily had as much damage to tourism. There's been more domestic tourism and so forth. We've still been able to go. We've also used the time with that team, which is a lot younger than the other company I run, to develop themselves online learning and upskilling and creating new technology for our clients. The educational business, without the movement of people, it has been a massive challenge. Fortunately, we've been able to rent our flats out, but what we've done is created remote virtual internship and learning programs for students, and we decided to do that this time last year, and we've looked after over 200 students now from all over America, with companies all over the UK, and that's pretty exciting, and it will be something that is here to stay. But yeah, it's been really tough, very, very tough 12 months.
Hasn't it? I'm sure, Donovan, you've experienced how difficult it is, because you're currently at university, right? I mean, That must have been difficult learning online, surely.
Definitely. There's a lot of distractions, and you're not taught during school or college how to adapt to these sorts of things. So it was kind of an experience where you had to quickly learn and adapt.
So looking at how the government has been able to support things, what are your thoughts about this current possible appointment of a Minister for Hospitality? And if that appointment really goes through and really happens, will this new minister, do you think he's really going to support the digital aspect of the sector, or do you think he's going to focus, or she, sorry, are they going to focus on really just that in-person aspect? What are your thoughts when it comes to this minister?
So, look at the moment, the Minister of Tourism is also the Minister of Sport.
I know.
Is also the Minister of Culture. Yeah. So, and over the last 11 years, the average length of tenure for a tourism minister is 9 months.
Yeah, it's been awful.
So it's not a core role. Yeah, the last person who'd been around for a while was a guy called Michael Ellis, and he was actually really good. And when there was issues around youth travel, which is really what I work in, youth and educational travel, emailed him, invited me to the offices with my colleague who runs Beta, the British Educational Travel Association. We went in, we talked, we went through all the issues. We were able to challenge what we felt Visit Britain weren't doing great. Obviously, Nigel Huddleston now is, and I've met a really nice guy, he took the role the first week of March last year. So let's be honest, no one really wants to be in government at the moment. He's on a hide into nothing. So I think it's very tough. He has been out and about. He has been supportive. My concern about this Minister for Hospitality, and I have asked a couple of people who are pushing for it, is which minister that is currently a elected MP would you have as the Minister of Hospitality full time? And there's no answer. Because the reality is hospitality is quite unique and you need to understand it to be able to be the minister of it. You know, Zahawi is a biochemist, or, you know, he studied, so vaccines for him and that, people are talking language he understands. I wouldn't understand it, but he understands it. And I think with hospitality, you can't have an MP or a minister who's not actually an MP. So and there's enough advisory groups already. So I don't know the benefit unless the whole structure is changed. So you actually do have a dedicated Minister for Tourism and a dedicated Minister for Hospitality, because actually tourism and hospitality, they're part of the same thing, but also quite different in terms of mindset and overall political structure and strategy.
It's missing, though. It's, you know, the focus on them. You know, everybody says they're trying to help, but with so many youth out of jobs, so many hospitality entities, and I think I'm talking about a lot of independent hotels as opposed to the large boxed hotel group, and the independents have suffered enormously on this, but they don't get the help they need. And I think their voice, whilst it might be put forward with the likes of like Kate Nichols of UK Hospitality or herself or Robin Shepherd and others, you know, getting to a table to sit down with them, to tell them what the specifics are and needed. That's the hope of having a hospitality minister. Whereas a culture minister or somebody who's taking on sport and 101 others is being pulled, as you said, in so many directions. So our voice isn't really being heard.
No, but I think a government, whoever it may be, needs to believe by hospitality, you know, and we look at it separately, tourism, thinking aviation and visas and everything else, and hospitality, more the operator's side. Someone who you're around the table with needs to understand the industry or feel that the industry is really important to the UK. I think this whole crisis has made people realise it's really important, but I don't think there's many MPs currently in government who have worked in hotels or love hospitality to a level you and I do, Stephen, because that is really, really important, because then you understand the nuances of, if you change visa requirements so chefs are not a skill, you will not have enough chefs because there aren't enough chefs in the UK anyway, you know. And if you want the great local Chinese restaurant to serve authentic foods, you're probably going to need a Chinese chef, so that they need to be able to come like they used to. So I agree the voice needs to be heard better. I think the independents have had more of a voice. I think there's been a lot more forum for them to speak directly to government. What is very important, it doesn't become a fractured voice, which is what has been for many years, where loads of different subgroups all talk to different people at different times, and it's still going on, which means government don't really understand the message. Reason why farming and fishing do so well with government: one association, one voice, same concerns, all feed in. And I think that's the industry ourselves have to restructure to be able to have a minister working properly.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the focus on our industry from our side should be a task force, something working with the government where you have our expertise, you know, invited in with the government to actually put some right where wrong is, to create a better understanding of the industry overall, because they don't, as you said, they don't have that background, that experience. But if they could oversee a task force coming from the industry, then I think we might have a better chance.
Yeah.
Steve, you're absolutely right. I mean, how many ministers have been parachuted into different roles and had no idea what they're doing and have just sort of wobbled around throughout this? You know, the current structure of the government without drastic reform is, you know, we're going to continue to get these ministers parachuted in and who are only looking at the next step up and not looking at the ministry that they're supposed to be looking after. And you also raise a good point. Hospitality is not tourism, although both are definitely intertwined. It really surprises me how little the government seems to care about the whole sector, because it's such an important sector, especially for some of our regions. I mean, you know, areas where the economy for old industry is declining, you know, the tourist industry could be booming in some of these lovely coastal towns, for example. Yet it's not, because the government doesn't care about it, or the ministers aren't putting in a focus on it. So it's such a difficult thing. To ask a sort of difficult question now, if you were parachuted in to be Minister of Hospitality tomorrow, under some imaginary circumstances, but what would be the number one thing you'd do?
You know, you've got Tourism Alliance, which I'm on the board of, which is actually very good because it does take everyone's concerns and filter it into government. But I don't think always the industry understands Tourism Alliance there. So to make sure that there is that communication. I think there's an awful lot of associations, and I think it's very important as minister for them to know they can share their concerns. Yeah, you can't please everybody. Yeah, whether you're managing a small company or managing a ministry or even a prime minister. It tends to be in elections a 60-40 split. Brexit was 51-49. You know, that's the reality these days. So it would be to join it up, and I think it would be really to get the Chancellor and his team, and I think they do understand it more, because they saw the lack of VAT income coming in. They saw the lack of, you know, taxes coming in generally from businesses in hospitality, that there is dedicated resource within the Chancellor's office understanding hospitality and tourism and the importance of that. And I think that is a key driver for a lot of industries. And those industries that get a lot of airtime within government, it's because they can show and prove the value to the UK economy. Post-Brexit Britain, you know, there's the real money, the actual, and there's the soft power, and particularly youth tourism. Youth tourism brings more soft power than I think almost any other industry, apart from maybe the film industry. Because if you come over here, you study for a year or a semester or a summer and have an amazing time, you become brand loyal. And actually to encourage that and grow that is not just about Minister of Hospitality or Minister of Tourism, it's actually Minister of Britain. You know, that actually should be a goal for the Prime Minister. And there is, you know, an international education strategy now to grow international students to 600,000 a year. Great, but you need to make sure that the whole infrastructure and the ecosystem of tourism and hospitality work for that, because there need to be accessible train passes, there needs to be student discounts in restaurants, there needs to be good value, cheap accommodation that's safe and clean and so forth. So I think, you know, building that ecosystem and helping the industry grow sustainably will be very, very important.
My next question was really going to ask you about the youth aspect of the industry, and you've explored a really interesting point there. I mean, I look back at when I went and did a couple of semesters abroad in Poland, and I remember that I went exploring by train, you know, all across Belarus and Ukraine and Moldova and Romania and all across Poland. And, you know, I look back and thought, in real terms, I spent a fair bit of money in those local economies. And that could be happening here as well in the UK. I think we've always really undersold how many our country as an educational hotspot. And it's always been true, twice as many students come to the UK than they leave for under the Erasmus scheme, for example. But which we're no longer part of, but we'll have to wait and see whether there's any sort of meaningful replacement to that under Turing. But you know, it's such a key part of the industry. Turning the flip side around, are we seeing enough young people go into the industry as wanting a career in hospitality? Do you think that's an issue facing the sector at all?
You've got the elite hotel schools that are price prohibitive for people going to work in hospitality. I mean, crazy money. Great teaching. I've been fortunate enough to lecture at a few of the places, and it's amazing facilities. Where I went and studied hospitality and tourism here, Salford University, they had a school for leisure, hospitality and sports. That was then pulled into the business school, and hospitality was disbanded within a couple of years. If you look at the UK itself, from higher education in hospitality, it's diminishing rather than growing, and a lot of quite famous hospitality departments are being shut down or reduced massively. And I'm not saying you have to have a hospitality degree to get into hospitality, because a lot of people get into it, just maybe college, sixth form college or whatever. But actually, there should be a track from the age of 11 all the way through to postgraduate level and teaching level, where if you love the industry, and 95% of young people will want to travel somewhere this year out of the UK or in the UK. Tourism's a cool place to be. So is hospitality, because if you get the tourism right, you're going to need the whole hospitality product there to be able to look after those people. It needs to be invested in an earlier stage. I think the challenge with hospitality doesn't go away. It's the working hours, it's the pay, but hostels are not going to start charging £100 a bed per night and paying general managers £100,000 a year. The economics don't work. So I think it's a challenge globally, and I think it's a wonderful industry that has made a lot of people who struggled academically into wonderful leaders, great business people, very creative. I've met so many amazing people from working in hospitality who are lifelong friends. And I have friends who are much more well-paid doctors or whatever, who are jealous of the friend network I have, because that's hospitality. It's a people industry. So I do think there's a challenge here. I think that's why we need visa regulation to allow people from abroad to work here in hospitality, because otherwise we just won't have the staff. I think there needs to be more focus on joining up the educational path for someone who's passionate about hospitality and tourism, from apprenticeships to higher education to college education. Will it change? I hope so. People joke that in France, being in hospitality is a career. They are starting to struggle as well. I think it's actually a global crisis for the sector, and I think the answer is make the industry attractive from when people are at school. I mean, my dream was to be a footballer. I'm not that good, or a chef. And if you want to be a chef, there's a defined route. You can start at 16. You can start at 12 if you wanted to. I used to cook at home. I did my basic training, but I can still cook a pretty good meal. I'm comfortable cooking for 100 people. That's a lifelong skill, whether I use that as a career or not. But again, it goes back to this whole ecosystem and government understanding the importance of it long term, and the soft power it creates, and the fact that a lot of people in hospitality end up doing amazing things in other sectors. Because I think the core skills you learn in hospitality and tourism are great for almost any people-based industry.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why so many young students actually go for hospitality as like a first job. It's often not just for the money. They choose hospitality because there's so much sort of transferable skills that come with that. It's amazing, and people do grow when they work. Even just simple bar, like work at a bar. The amount of skills that you can develop from that is absolutely incredible. It was interesting, just before we came on to this call, Donovan was telling me how he was always slightly put off by hospitality because it's quite a hard industry to get into, but because it seems that for somebody who's in his position who's not done a hospitality education, what did you study in university, Donovan?
Politics and international relations.
Well, there you go. So, for somebody who's not got that hospitality background, it's still a people person background, of course. I mean, politics is a people thing. But it's so difficult for someone to break into the sector without that education background. if you were trying to advise somebody who, say, was maybe 19, 20, had just finished their A-levels in something nothing to do with hospitality, is university the best way for them to get into the sector for a proper career?
I think there's so many routes. I mean, there's management schemes, there's school graduate schemes, there's apprenticeship schemes. You know, the big brands, the independents. You know, Stephen will know more about in America, where there's a lot of tracks that people choose. You know, all the big brands have great programs. I don't agree with a lot of what they're taught because I think they become too robotic. But it still gives you the core skills. If you have a personality, it gives you that core skill. I do like the hospitality management degree students often because you do a business management degree, basically, and you learn some other skills, some what people would say soft skills. But, you know, generally, being able to cook for yourself is an amazing skill to have. And you learn that with hospitality. You learn how to deal with people face to face, serving them around a table, difficult guests, nice guests, weird guests, you know, you come across that in life. So I think people management skills that you learn from hospitality management or tourism management are really good. And I probably learned it in a time I studied between 2000 and 2003 where hospitality really didn't have a voice in the UK. And that when I said I was doing hospitality management, people said, "Oh, so you're doing home economics for your degree?" And I went, "Not really. I'm training as a chef 12 hours a day, once a week, and then I'm doing a business management degree. And in your first year at university, even if you're studying politics and international relations, you ain't doing 30, 35 hours in the classroom or training or whatever." So it was way harder. And to be honest, the modules I was doing around marketing or people management or service systems or HR or accountancy were the same as my friends who are doing business management, but I could cook and they couldn't. So, you know, it doesn't have to be the route. And now within hotels, particularly, if you're a revenue manager, it's great for people who've got computer science skills, very data analytical, you know. I think HR now in hospitality, people who are interested in human resources and people development, they can be teaching that and then be taught about hospitality. There are some more defined skills like chefing and cooking and so forth that require training, but that doesn't have to be at university. That can be, yeah, there's some wonderful catering colleges in the UK still. Or some restaurants will take on junior people who are passionate about food, who show their passion, who dream of being a master chef and train them up. And if you look at master chef, the professionals, there's a lot of people who go, "Oh, my first job was when I was 16, I was washing dishes." And that's a wonderful thing about hospitality. It gives a lot of people opportunity that otherwise wouldn't have that.
And I'd like to agree with that, Stephen. There's also the knock on the front door policy, which I ascribe to. I think it's a great way of approaching hotels or restaurants or event management. You know, there's 101 ways of getting into this industry, and I think one of the best ways is by approaching them directly. If you want to learn from the bottom, you're going to really be the best. Because I think if you have any of these set skills coming into a hotel or a restaurant or any background experience in hospitality, they want to listen to you because there's always a shortage. There's no question that somewhere down the line, if you've left your resume or your CV and you can tell them of your experience, no matter how small, you could get that call back, or you might even get a call in straight away.
It's such a nice sort of way in, I guess. Yeah, it's from the bottom up. It's much more open for opportunities, and it's much better like that. So just to slightly change the topic, do you think there's enough digitalisation going on in the hospitality and the tourism sectors together? I asked that as somebody who works in the digital, and I was recently told earlier on that, for example, the camping sector is entirely undigital still. There seems to be still a way to go in the sector as a whole.
Yes and no. It's very regional, very sector specific within it. There's some amazing technology. I mean, there's a lot of AI being used for pricing. Uber were criticised when the London Bridge attacks happened and their surge pricing started. That's because of AI. That's the same with hotels and airlines. If you look at an airline price 3 times, the price goes up. That's pretty high tech. That's more than when you look at shopping on Ocado or Asda or whatever. So I think there are still a lot of mom and pop shops who run wonderful businesses, and technology seems to get in the way of what they do. Technology is there to make your life easier and to improve what you do. I think when I started in the hotels in 2000, and it was a hostel actually in 2004, we were pretty forward thinking, and your colleague James would know that that's when I first met him. We were a bit ahead of the game, and it made our life way easier and gave us competitive advantage. I think now technology is very, very accessible, and it's very cost effective for almost any business within hospitality and tourism. However, some businesses just don't need it. If a campsite has 20 lots rented to 20 people who are the same 20 people every year, if you can email and you've got a good secure Excel spreadsheet, maybe you don't need to digitalize it. If there's a competitive advantage and a financial gain from doing it, then they should do more. I think there is way to go, and I think there is a generation difference within hospitality. But I think over the last decade, there has been a lot more investment from tiny little B&Bs to the big brands like Marriott because of the importance of it, but also better understanding and also way better technology-based products that are more accessible for whatever your budget.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology is often seen as this thing that we have to have, but you're right, absolutely. It's there to help us, it's there to enhance, and where it doesn't enhance and help, there's no point. If somebody in the Cotswolds has a campsite, as you say, with always 20 plots and all the 20 plots are always sold, there's no need for that. But, we'll wait and see what happens in the next few years. So the last thing I really wanted to touch upon is something we can't ignore. It's climate change. And it's quite a broad question we ask pretty much all of our guests that come on this show and this podcast is, how do you think the sector will continue to be such a key sort of aspect in planning for the future, especially in relation to the COP26 we've got in Glasgow, and I suppose from your experience running more digital aspects of the sector in both the hospitality and the tourism sectors?
I think obviously there's the transport issue, which being sustainable with it is really important. I think weirdly, backpackers are very sustainable because they tend to travel for a long time and tend not to fly so much. They use a lot of public transport. And I think sustainability around climate is equally as important around society and economy. I think encouraging people to disperse their spend around a country in a sustainable manner is also really important, because I think there's a lot of focus on the climate part, which is right. I think the planet is burning up. I think the challenge is it's not a globally straight line of everyone believing in it, and ultimately we all have to do this together. Like the vaccine rollout, like many things that have happened in the last year, it's proved that we're quite a dysfunctional planet. We're a collection of hundreds of countries that all have their own way of doing things, or even in the UK, 4 little countries all do things differently. So I think it's something that will happen. I think the trends will be people will travel less but travel longer. People will travel local more. So staycations in your own city, staying in a different part of London and exploring restaurants that you would never go to because it's on the south of the river or something, will be something. And I think it's important for all companies to understand. I think leaving your towels on the floor if you want them changed, or hung up if you don't want them changed, that's a cost saving thing. It does make a difference, but I've been in hotels where I've hung stuff up and they still get washed. So, it's a fundamental mentality shift, but it's a societal one of people really believing that these little incremental changes will make a big difference. And I think I turned 40 in December. I'm of a generation that believes in it. I also think there's a lot of people older that don't, and people younger that don't. So, I'm absolutely desperate to travel. I've not had a day off for a while, but but it's more. I love the exploration. I love being in new places. I love that fear and excitement of not knowing where to go or how to do it. Even in the States, and I go around the States at university towns, and you turn up sometimes and you're like, wow, this is out of a 50s movie. And I think that excitement will never change because we're humans and we have traveled around the planet since day one. Otherwise we'd all be stuck near Ethiopia with the original setup, creation of man. So I think we are explorers. I think we used to explore more sustainably by boat without petrol. That's, technology, I believe, will be the changer of it. I think the vaccine has proved that the science and technology actually available to us is far greater than what we use. I mean, far greater. And I took to reading the Lancet and the British Medical Journal this time last year because the press and the government were so negative about everything. It felt like we were going to be in this till 2025. And I'm a positive person. I thought, this can't be possible. So I started reading all the science behind it. And again, I studied hospitality. And it was fascinating. And I was like, wow, we're going to have a vaccine by the end of the year. Everyone thought I was nuts. But the science showed that. And the fact that the whole world could come together using Zoom and databases and AI and all of the stuff that we have to our hand gives me great confidence that we will find solutions for travel to be sustainable. And you've got massive disruptors like Elon Musk who will help that happen, amongst others. So I think it's a massive issue. I think we need to focus on the things that we can fix quickly. Food waste, trying to use what you grow rather than bringing in asparagus from Mexico, getting more seasonal with things. This whole fishing thing around Brexit has been a disaster, which should actually have been the crowning triumph for the fishing industry here, because we don't eat herrings. Well, let's get it on TV and show people how to eat herrings. I love herrings.
I love herrings.
I love herrings as well. There you go.
I think there's so many quick wins. And I think, obviously there's a lot of focus on the big picture stuff, fossil fuels and everything else, but there's so much that can be done as quick wins. I think if we focus on that, it makes hospitality and tourism way more sustainable.
Couldn't agree more. And all this seasonal food is just as delicious as the non-seasonal food. So, there's no real excuse for it, is there? I'm fully on board with that. Thank you so much, Stephen, for this. It's been wonderful to listen to some of your really interesting insights in different aspects of both the hospitality and the tourist industries. Stephen, I don't know if you want to say a few closing words.
Just finally, Steve, I just want to say it is wonderful. Your experience is enormous across so many sectors, and we'd be happy to have you as our hospitality minister candidate at the Renew Party someday. And all that aside, we do appreciate you being on board, and we really do hope that we can get to meet you in person when when everything's ready and when we can all go back. And hospitality folks are probably the most optimistic folks you're going to meet anywhere on the planet. So I know it's a long road, but we're all getting there. And I'm really pleased to have you on board.
Thank you very much for the kind words.
But thanks again for your time today. And and we look forward to meeting you in person.
Great. Yeah. Well, I'm in the office in town anyways.
We're here too. All right. Take care, Stephen. Thanks very much.
Take care. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.